Welcome back to News Hub this morning. Of course, we'll delve into the first conversation to welcome look set an agenda for the incoming ministers. We're going to assess them and then set agenda. What are those things that Nigerians expect from the new ministers? And of course, what are the things that should be given urgent attention? And what are those things that they should look at later? And of course, joining us on this conversation in our Abuja studios is Dr. Agbo Major, is the National Publicity Secretary of the NNPP, New Nigeria's People's Party. Dr. Agbo Major, good morning, and thanks for joining us on News Hub.
Yeah, good morning. Thank you so much for having me.
Quickly, let's look at of the ministers, and of course, if portfolios have been handed over to them. In your own opinion, let's look at the sequence of the challenges Nigerians are facing. Which do you think should be given urgent priority when the ministers have finally had their portfolios?
Well, one very interesting thing is the fact that Nigerians are in their need for leadership. They're in their need for the change in the turn of events. A lot of things have gone wrong for us as a country. There have been almost near absence of leadership all this while. The past 8-9 years have been quite traumatic. And we got to a level that Nigerians absolutely lost trust and confidence on their leaders. And so with this new government in place and then with the crop of ministers that are coming on board, yes, it's obvious that we have a mixture of technocrats as well as politicians, But for the first time, we're having more of technocrats, more of people who are grounded in their various fields of endeavor. And so we strongly believe that by the time they hit the ground running, the expectations of Nigerians are that things must change. Of course, the cost of living has become an issue. There's massive infrastructural decay. Our educational system is not working. The security architecture is also faulty. These are very serious things that until they are confronted head-on, of course, we'll continue to stay in one position rolling. But if you look at it, the myriad of problems we have, you see that once one is solved, like key things like getting the economy to work, maybe the unacceptable exchange rate now, which has spiraled into what we now see as galloping inflation, where people simply do not have value for the money they have and all of that. Once all these things are dealt with and then the educational system is brought back working, other issues like security and all of that. I've always believed that security on its own is not a challenge. It is only when there are idle minds, that's when we'll continue to be faced with these security challenges. But once people are productively engaged, the economy is working, the schools are there functioning properly, people are able to go to schools and all of that, you will see that the challenges of insecurity would in no time at all be a thing of the past. So we see ministers, some of these incoming ministers with a lot of energy, some of them with so much zeal to deliver. And then we also know that they are going to be working under a president who seems to be very, very determined, knowing fully well that the expectations of Nigerians are very high. And so it's expected that by the time they are handed over their portfolios, maybe later this week or so, like we're hearing, or maybe next week or so, they should hit the ground running and then get this economy back working again and get the country working.
Hey, Doctor, it's very interesting to hear from an opposition party speaking of optimism about what is going on with another party, of course, the party in power. Many would say maybe it's not very strange because we did see your presidential candidate, Kwakwanso, really hobnobbing, as some would refer to, with the president when he won the election and assumed office. Is this easy to say before we continue on this line of discussion to say that NNPP is already in an alliance with the APC? All right, I hope that he answers the question in just a moment. Just stay with us. You're still watching News Hub. I'll be back with you on the program.
Thank you.
All right. Back. So let's continue from the question that I asked you before that break. It will seem as if to say NNPP is on the same page with the APC on almost everything the government has been putting out since assumption of office on May 29, 2023. And I actually exemplified this through the fact that your presidential candidate in the last election has been hobnobbing with the president. He was with him. Immediately he won the election, and he seemed as if to say things are really going on between both of them. Is this representative of the relationship between the APC and the NNPP?
Well, for us in the New Nigeria People's Party, we've always insisted that what divides politicians is the campaign period, you know. Once the campaigns are over and the elections are held and winners emerge, the agenda becomes one, and that is the country. You know, but then to say that it appears as if we're on the same page on all matters with the APC-led government, I don't think that's entirely correct, because we're an opposition party and our job is to oppose constructively where we see that certain things are being done that are not in the interest of the governed, that is the interest of Nigerians. We will always ask questions, and if you are following us carefully, you would see that from time to time we tell Nigerians what we feel should be done but are not being done, or maybe when programs are churned out or statements are made by the government, the ones that we feel are not too good. You know, we always come out to say these are not too good, that if it were us, we would have done it this way and all of that. However, our style of opposition is not to continue to criticize. You know, you don't criticize when you have no solutions to proffer. So if you are following us, you would see that each time we disagree with the government on issues, we always come out to say, okay, this would have been the best way to go and all of that. Yes, that the presidential candidate, like you have said, you know, use the word hobnobbing, and I think that is not the way to go. The truth is that we had insisted even before now that these two people in question have been friends. You know, remember that they both served as governors at almost about the same time and all of that. They've also been together as politicians, and so the fact that they belong to two different political parties does not mean that they've ceased to be friends, you know. That's number one. Then number two, they are both statesmen, and it's incumbent on them to ensure that the polity is stable, you know. You don't have to necessarily hit the polity, and that, of course, is the style of His Excellency Rabi Musa Kwankwaso. He puts the country first in everything he does and all of that, and so it's not out of place when you see them, you know, talking. But I think whatever you see them doing, I can tell you, is in the interest of the nation and then the stability of the polity. So we are not, once again, as a matter of emphasis, let me say that it's not as if everything that is done by this government is taken by us completely. We have continued to criticize some of the things they do, and I can tell you that our responsibility is to continue to criticize them, but like I said, each time we criticize, we also try to proffer solutions by telling Nigerians that if it were us, we would have done it this way for better results to be achieved and all of that. All
right. You started with my colleague saying that you're very optimistic that once the names of the ministerial nominees sent to the Senate cleared, are portioned, their portfolios, you want to expect them to hit the ground running. But before we talk about the names, really, many people are worried about the number of those nominees based on the fact, if you want to put into consideration the economic situation in the country, and also the fact that the president had talked about the possible implementation of the Oransteye report of 2012, which normally should prune down the number of people in government and ensure that there's a slim kind of people in power, number of people in power, so that we can have the best of the best. So the number of nominees and the federal character, as well as the reality in the country as to what is going on, how do you ratify all these?
It's worrisome. The size of this cabinet, that is being proposed is worrisome, just like I think it should be to any other Nigerian, because at the time we have an economy that is unstable, at the time we have an economy that is hemorrhaging, at the time we have an economy that is barely able to even take care of the basic needs of our people, like payment of salaries and all of that, and the provision of infrastructures. The first time in the history of governance in this country, we're going to be going with over 40-something ministers, It's not acceptable, because Nigerians had expected that one of the things the APC has always talked about is that they would want to cut down on the size of, the cabinet. They would want to cut down on the cost of governance. Every party has insisted on that, by way of saying, okay, once we're in power, we would ensure that we have a size that will not be a burden, to our wobbling economy. But here we are, faced with the reality that we have a government that is going to roll with about 48 ministers or so. I doubt if they have stopped. It's most likely that they would bring more. I'm not too sure. Because at the time we thought they had stopped, they brought Keyamo and one other person, So it's likely that they would bring more. Nobody can say, nobody can read their minds. But it's worrisome, because it's going to put a lot of burden on the economy. It's not acceptable to us as a party, and I think it's also not acceptable to the generality of Nigerians, because the expectations are that money that is going to be spent managing the size of this cabinet would have been deployed into provision of infrastructures, would have been deployed into revamping of the educational system, would have been deployed into provision of security and all of that. At a time that Nigerians are in their need for all of this, we're going to be faced with the challenge of having to use our lean purse to manage this size of people. And most times, the most worrisome aspect of it is that effective checks are not put on the activities of these people. You discover a lot of them to be burdened to the government, and then burdened to you and I, who are taxpayers, because a lot of them are just there. They don't evaluate the system. We saw it happen, at least in the government. Remember that government never sacked any single minister for a whole 8 years, and it's not as if all of them were doing well. The indices were clear. It is clear that a lot of them were just not doing what they were being paid to do. But then, one of them got. Of course, we expect that this government would provide that those who add value to the system would be shown the way out. Because one of the things that has been a problem in this country is when the head is unable to check who are part of it, who to deliver on the assignments they are paid with taxpayers' money to deliver on, So the size is worrisome, like I said, but let us down, having done it, maybe that's the way they have chosen to go. We'll continue to talk about it, but then I think it's now incumbent on them to ensure that they convince us, on the need for us to accept this size as a reality by ensuring that they are kept on their toes to deliver on the assignments. Eventually, the portfolios that would be given, the ministries that will be assigned to, they have to be seen to be delivering and then adding value to the operations in such ministries. If that happens, Doctor, to a certain extent, it will be able to assuage the feelings of Nigerians that our money is not being wasted.
All right, so that we can manage time and you can give us as much information as possible on the show today. You've just hit it right there. The names of those that have come up to be ministers have been cleared. What's your party's view on their capacities to be, although we don't know the portfolios that have been assigned to them, but some of them you can really tell where they gravitate towards. What's your view?
You see, in advanced climes, in other democracies, people are hired based on their trainings, based on their antecedents, based on their past experiences. It's only in Nigeria and then maybe a few other African countries that you would see somebody who is a trained teacher, appointed as a minister and then posted to power. We saw the screening. A lot of them were asked specific questions, aside the ones we know, who have served in several capacities in the past, who have added value to the system, aside a few of them who appeared during the screening, and seems to ask questions that are directly related to maybe the assumed portfolios that they would eventually get. What should be the underlying factor is that people should be assigned to where they have some kind of background that would watch. For instance, there are proposals that people who have in electricity, for instance, you don't go and take somebody who has no knowledge of electricity and send him to Minister of Power. You will see that he will just be there without having to add any value. You don't go and take somebody who has no knowledge of communications, and then send him to Federal Minister of Information as Information Minister, because he wouldn't add value. So our expectations and the expectations of Nigerians is that the assignment of these portfolios should be done basically on the background of the ministers that were screened. It should be done basically based on the antecedents, at least looking at those who have served in several capacities in public offices in the past. Where did they do well? Where were those places where they served? What values did they add and all of that? So let us begin now to go away from this idea of just mere political patronage.
Yeah.
Let us now begin to look at what do you have, to be able to, because we are faced with the reality of getting this country to work again. And so we cannot continue to experiment. So what is expected is that people should be sent to where they will have what it takes to be able to deliver on these assignments. Those are the expectations
we
of
have
Nigerians.
We have just 2 minutes to go now. Let's just play since the portfolios are not assigned. For instance, what portfolio do you think will be given to the former governor of Rivers State who's been cleared? I think Dele Alake, some people can say for sure. And let me take a woman also, Betty Aidu, who, as we speak, is still the women's leader of the APC and some others. What portfolios are you looking for? Who at this point in time?
Without fears of being misunderstood, we all know that the former Rivers State governor cost.
Okay, that's a freeze on a very important, very interesting question, which would have been able to really put across and hear the response of the publicity secretary of the New Nigeria People's Party, NNPP, who's been speaking with us on the President Tinubus Cabinet. The expectation is, even as we await to know the portfolios that will be assigned. Please continue on your line of thought, Doctor. We have just 30 seconds to go. If you can hear me, okay? I think the network is going on and off there. So I think that we will still bring him back if we're not able to really complete on this particular one, if we can't conclude on this conversation today. Lots of other questions that we also have for the NNPP as well as other opposition parties in the country as this administration paddles the affairs of the country. Thank you very much, Dr. Agbo Major, NNPP National Policy Secretary, who's been with us on the show today. We apologize for all the hiccups. We do hope to bring you back so we can have enough time to hear you out on some national issues and some party issues. Thank you very much.
Thank you. You're welcome.
All right.